Kentucky's got extremely high expectations for this upcoming season, and I think Mark Pope and the Cats can meet the moment.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we sat down with Isaac Shade, host of the Locked On College Basketball podcast, to preview Kentucky's season. We give thoughts on the individual players that Mark Pope has brought in. We give thoughts on the expectations this season, breakout players, the expectations for the defense, all in that and more coming your way. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Here's our conversation with Isaac Shade.
Today is our 18th team preview of the offseason. You can catch all of them in a playlist we've made on YouTube. I'll link to it up there in the top corner of the screen by Lance's beautiful head. Speaking of which, joining me on the show today is Locked On's great host of Locked On Kentucky, none other than recent birthday boy, Mr. Lance Dawe. Lance, It's great to be together and be chatting some cats. Excited to get it going.
Yeah, man, this is you talk about what last year was as far as just a major success for Mark Pope, but man, things really amp up quick with Big Blue Nation as far as expectations goes. It should be a pretty big time year for Pope and company.
So that first year that Lance just referred to for Mark Pope, the Cats went 24-12 overall, 10-8 in SEC play, tied for 6th, and then in the SEC tournament beat OU before falling to Bama in the quarterfinals, earned a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, ultimately lost to the Vols in the Sweet 16. Otega Oweh, leading scorer at 16.2 points a game. We're going to talk about him a good bit here on this episode because my man tested the water and thankfully came back to college basketball, and that's going to be just fine. And I know somebody who's very excited about that is Mark Pope. You said it, Lance, massive expectations in year 2 for Mark Pope, both because of there's always massive expectations for Kentucky and because it seems like there's the personnel to do it. Are they ready to live up to it? What do you think?
Right. And that is the question, like you just mentioned about the personnel, because as far as, any advanced computer model or anybody who just looks at the roster on paper, anyone can tell you, just looking at this from a lot of different angles, this is a super talented roster. I believe Evan Mia has this as the preseason 8th most talented roster in the country. And that's reflected in both what Kentucky's done through the recruiting rankings and then also getting high profile talent in the transfer portal. And last year, Kentucky kind of had to make this thing on the fly. They had to put together the entire roster in about a month and a half or so. And while there were some really, really solid players, you wouldn't necessarily say that Wildcats team was uber talented. They were built to do one thing well, and that was shoot the basketball. And it got them through a lot of really important games. I believe Mark Pope won his first 3 straight games against like AP top 10, top 15 opponents, which is the first coach to do that since Rupp. He was able to get it done with kind of this hodgepodge of transfers. But now that he's had time to assess what the SEC is about, assess what high profile college basketball is like down here in the SEC, he is able to adjust and maybe able to go get some more physical players, some more talented players. Now that he's got more time to recruit some guys that can kind of meet the physicality and the style of play in this league. And I think that, again, looking at what Pope has done on paper, he's done everything that you could possibly ask for this offseason if you're a Kentucky fan, as far as getting players that kind of fit what you want to see out of Kentucky that they struggled with a season ago. Physicality, rebounding, rim protection. They've got all different kinds of guys that can help them out in that area. So there's really big time expectations for Pope. And as far as roster construction is going, I mean, yeah, absolutely Kentucky can live up to those expectations just based on the guys that he's brought in.
Lance, I know when Mark Pope was announced as coach, not all of Big Blue Nation was exactly thrilled, I'll say. I think they all, or at least the vast majority, quickly changed their tune, as well they should have, because it's turned out really well. A year into this thing, are you ready to say that Mark Pope was the right hire?
I think that he was not only the right hire, I think that as far as culture goes and as far as fit goes, it might be the best hire that Kentucky has ever made, full stop. There is not a single coach that they could have brought in that understands the University of Kentucky better, understands the fan base better, understands the expectations better. I think that if you had gone out and gotten somebody like a Billy or a Billy Donovan or a Danny Hurley, would they have really truly understood what it meant to be at Kentucky and what the expectation was and how to fulfill that expectation and what to actually go out and do to satisfy this fan base? I don't really know if they would have. I don't really know if they would have cared as much as Mark Pope does. And that's not to say that they would not have had success. Let me be clear. I'm saying as far as culture and vibes and all, frankly, success goes, I don't think that you could have found a better person to come coach at this job than Mark Pope. Now, of course, he could be in for a down year this year. Who knows? It's just we're all just speculating and projecting before the season starts. But as of right now, there's not a person in college basketball that I'd rather have leading my program at Kentucky than Mark Pope. And I think that a lot of that has to do with just how much he gets what Big Blue Nation is.
We knew going into last year, as you said, kind of had to scrounge around and get a bunch of players together. A lot of them were in that last year of eligibility, Lance. Others went off to the draft, et cetera, et cetera. Thankfully, as we mentioned already, leading scorer Otega Oweh is back. But Lance, that's critically important because the other starters are gone. It's critically important because none of the other top 6 scorers return. In fact, only 2 of the top 9 scorers return. Leading scorer number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9 from last year are all out the door. So yes, Otega Oweh in a lot of ways takes this team on his back, but it feels like maybe he doesn't. And I know we're going to talk more personnel in the next segment, but did they get the right personnel in your opinion, Lance, to where he doesn't have to bear this whole load on his own?
Well, I think that Oweh can still be the guy that kind of takes over a game for you or is that primary offensive engine, someone that can be effective with the ball in his hands, someone that can get downhill and score. But something that I was really a big time advocate of this offseason was, look, go find guys that can actually get to the rim, can actually handle the ball and get through traffic and finish at the rim this offseason, because Otega can't be just that one guy that can get you a straight line drive in a bucket whenever you need it. And yes, we can talk about personnel a little bit more here in the second segment, kind of dive into the different players that can actually go and make that happen. But as it stands right now, Otega, he can be that guy, but thankfully Kentucky has gone out and gotten some of those different guys outside of him, especially at guard, that can go and create a little bit. So Otega, I think, has SEC Player of the Year potential based off of his scoring alone. But he doesn't necessarily, I think, have to do as much as he did a season ago. So it's going to be really interesting what Mark Pope chooses to do with him in terms of volume. Do they get him as many touches as they did a season ago? Do they have to get him as many touches as they did a season ago? Do other players in this backcourt actually step up to where you can reliably spread the ball around a little bit more evenly? And I'll just say this, it's not also about scoring with Otega, who is going to be very important to this team. Mark Pope believes that he can be one of the best defenders in this conference. I believe that he can be an improved defender. I don't know how much of an improved defender he can be. They're asking him to do more with the ball. I think that it's going to be important to see him kind of become more of a creator. Pope says that he can be one of the better passers as well on this team. There's a lot of different things outside of just scoring that Otega can improve on. And it's crazy considering he scored 16 a game for one of the better programs in the country last year. It's like saying, okay, well, he can still be better. And I think he can, but how he is actually utilized will be fascinating to watch because, like you just mentioned, 2 of the top 9 scorers returned, but there's so much to be excited about here outside of Oweh. It's going to be fascinating to see how exactly they divvy it all up.
Lance, speaking of Otega Oweh, he was 5th on the team in terms of three-point shooting last year, percentage-wise. None of the 4 dudes above him are back, including SEC leading three-point shooter, Mr. Kobe Brea. Wow. That was a great addition there. Good grief for the Cats last year. That said, we expect the fighting Popes to keep bombing away from beyond the arc. And so I think the question becomes who's going to step up, right? Because you love Jaland Lowe. He had a low 3-point percentage at Pitt last year, but he also had a hurt finger. He also didn't have as much talent playing around him, right? And so who in your mind can step up into that gap? Because it's a Mark Pope team. They're going to try to shoot 30 to 35 threes a game in an ideal world. How does that look?
Pope has been very clear over the last couple of weeks or so that Kentucky is not shying away from spraying it from beyond the arc. Like you just mentioned, Kentucky is going to continue to shoot. With that being said, there's not a Kobe Brea on this roster. Let's be clear. There's not a Kobe Brea. There's not anybody on this roster that's going to wow you in terms of that level of efficiency and shot making, both off of the dribble and in catch and shoot situations. Kentucky is going to try and recreate some of the magic through multiple players instead of having just one guy that's kind of your high profile flamethrower. I know you obviously had Ainsley Almanor as well, coming off the bench a season ago, who was just absolutely incredible for what Kentucky was asking him to be. So who's going to step up? I think first and foremost, Colin Chandler has to be that guy at guard coming off the bench, likely for Kentucky, shooting much like Kobe Brea did. This kid, if you watched late in the season when Kentucky was kind of forced to play him more and more and more, he was shooting over 40% towards the end of the season. He was knocking down threes, and it wasn't just he was hitting the threes at the line. He was shooting from deep, both in the regular season and the NCAA tournament. Just a very, very confident shooter, Colin Chandler. So he's going to have to step up and showcase why he was one of the highest rated recruits coming out of high school several years ago. He's going to also have to have Trent Noah step up, who, according to reports, has been phenomenal in practice. And then, like you mentioned, Jaland Lowe. I've talked about this and written about this at length about Jalen and his efficiency and whether or not his broken finger had anything to do with his poor shooting slump and how he can kind of get back to where he was at his freshman year. And I'll just say this: if Jalen is able to shoot 35% like he did in his freshman year and bring the value that he does scoring and distributing, the kid's an all-conference player, and he might be an All-American depending on how all things go. I mean, the ceiling for Lowe is very high. And I'll also say the floor shooting the ball is pretty low, no pun intended, as we saw a season ago at Pitt. But Lowe is going to have to step up. I think that Jasper Johnson's going to have to be really efficient in spot-up situations. I think that you're also going to have to see Otega shoot the ball maybe a little bit better. Andrea Jelovic is somebody that I think we're really excited about shooting the basketball. Cam Williams was shooting 41% at Tulane as a freshman. He's going to have to be big. A lot of different guys here that you can get excited about as shooters, but will they actually become consistent shooters, especially in the SEC? We're just going to have to wait and see. But who's going to step up? There's a lot of different options right now.
All right, last year, Kentucky, top 25 team in the nation in terms of three-point percentage at 37.5. We'll see if they can find a way to get back there, because the volume is going to be in place. As we've said, Kentucky loses a lot of production, but boy, is this team deep. Who's going to join Otega Oweh in repopulating the starting lineup? And who's the breakout for Kentucky this year? Because as Lance said, I feel like I could choose from one of any number of players. We'll ask him coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Mazda, who crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details, and Mazda brings that same level of intentionality to how they craft every single model. You can feel that incredible Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to the available Napa leather upholstery. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season, because with Mazda, everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And like Kentucky Wildcats, Mazda, man, they sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode is also brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend again, so it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, which is powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, by the way, this player delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. I got to go to a state very close to the Bluegrass State for the Indiana Hoosiers. Fernando Mendoza delivered in a massive way. This homie was 21 of 23 for 267 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. When the pressure was on, Mendoza came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. This Hoosier is on a streak. And just like Mendoza delivered for Indiana, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep that streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. And that promo period is going to run all the way through November 18th. Lance, we're going to move now into talking more specifics about personnel. Obviously, we talked a good deal about Otega Oweh already, but there are 3 other returning players to this team, at least at a kind of scholarship level. And I know that's a whole new phrase now because it's different with scholarships, whatever. But those other 3 players are BG, Brandon Garrison, Trent Noah, and Colin Chandler. Aside from Otega Oweh, that other trio, does it really help kind of cement what Mark Pope is trying to do in Lexington?
Yeah, I think so, both in terms of just trying to be more consistent with roster turnover being kind of crazy for everybody now. And then also I think in terms of what these individuals are actually going to be bringing to the table stylistically for Pope, it kind of helps cement what he wants to kind of make his teams look like, so to speak, in terms of the outside shooting, in terms of the efficiency, in terms of the really hard-nosed basketball you get at different points with each of these different players. It's really nice to have this kind of core return because I see very high upside with a guy like Colin Chandler. I mean, like very high upside with a guy like Colin Chandler. I'm not quite sure if he's going to be able to showcase what he could be statistically because of just the minutes per game that he's going to get this year.
Sure.
I think that Trent Noah can be a hyper efficient player off the bench that, again, might not get the big time minutes, but I think can be very valuable in terms of a spot up guy. You can utilize both of the way that both of these players are utilized and play this season. You can utilize that in recruiting in the transfer portal absolutely next season. So I think that it's big that those guys are back. Otega, obviously, big that he's back. And then Brandon Garrison, a wild card for this team, man. Super inconsistent a year ago. You saw some really high highs in terms of defense, in terms of passing ability, as Pope likes to get his centers involved in the offense. And it's been more of the same this offseason, according to different reports, that BG is just kind of struggling to break through consistency-wise, and apparently he's been playing better these last few weeks. But can you get him to that level that you need him at, especially with Jayden Quaintance maybe not ready for the start of the season? That's the big question mark. So Brandon Garrison, wild card here. It's nice to have him back, though. I'd much rather have him than not. And all 4 of these guys, I think, are going to be big for Kentucky in various ways.
You mentioned JQ, Lance. We've gone well far enough into the show without talking about him. There are 6 transfer portal additions coming in, including Denzel Aberdeen, national champion, coming over from Florida. Jaland Lowe, we've already talked about from Pitt. Mo Diabate, not a national champion, but a Final Four guy coming over from Alabama. Reese Potter from Maryland. Cam Williams, who you mentioned before, nice size from him. And then JQ. Jayden Quaintance, coming over from Arizona State, couldn't leave to go to the NBA draft because he's too young. So he had to play his second year of college basketball. And I think the thing that everyone's wondering is, how soon can this guy be ready to go? I recently listened to an episode with Coach Pope and Matt Norlander on the CBS Eye on College Basketball podcast. And Norlander really tried to get Coach Pope nailed down on when he thought JQ would be ready. And he understandably beat around the bush with it. But and I know defense is going to be a critical thing for Kentucky this year, right? Like they were fine last year. I think finished like 50th at Ken Palm in defensive efficiency, but that's not good enough for what Coach Pope wants. JQ is a critical part of that. Lance, how quickly can he get back?
What you hear from this staff as far as JQ's health and the timeline and when he can return, I think right now, I could be completely wrong, I think is different than when he's going to actually return. I think that Jayden Quaintance, based on what we've seen, will be ready by the start of the season. I don't think he's going to play in either of the exhibition games. I don't even know if he's going to play in the first game of the season, but I think he's going to be ready to play for a couple of different reasons. Number one, probably a month or so ago, a picture surfaced of Otega Oweh and Jayden Quaintance at a park, and 2 shocking things in that photo. Otega Oweh in a boot, which freaked all of Big Blue Nation out. Turf toe, he's going to be back in like a week or so. That's great to hear that he's doing fine now. But Jayden Quaintance was dunking in slides. He was rearing back for a dunk in slides, and this man's coming fresh off of a knee surgery. He's going to be ready, I think. And what you're seeing as far as like videos of him exercising and working out, and something interesting that Pope said recently, I believe with the Field of 68, whenever they made their trip up a week or so ago, about how the strength in both of his legs is almost back to perfectly even.
Wow.
It's almost perfectly balanced now. And on top of that, he's like 20% stronger than the average NBA player at his height and weight, which is crazy to think about. It's like, not only is he almost back to 100% in both legs, but also he's a lot stronger than what you're normally getting in the league. So Jayden Quaintance, I think health-wise, I know the staff is going to be very cautious, and they're going to say, well, we're going to try and be as cautious and as slow with this as possible to make sure that we don't injure him. And of course they should be. But as far as health goes, I think if they really wanted to, I think they could play him in the Louisville game. Absolutely, I think they could play him in the Louisville game just based on what we're seeing. Now, I could end up being dead wrong,
Sure.
but it's hard to go out there and dunk in slides and be doing all of what you're doing in practice and hear your coach say, yeah, basically he's back to full health, and not think, okay, by early November, a week or so into November, this kid's not going to be at least ready to go. So I think that JQ will be. It's just a matter of whether or not this staff is going to run him out there as quickly as they possibly can. For me, if he's 100%, I'd sure like to see him play 15 or 20 minutes against Louisville because of how important he could be in that game.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Man, which that game is criminally early in the
Way
season.
too early.
We'll talk about that in the next segment. Kentucky also brings in a 3-man freshman class: Jasper Johnson, Malachi Moreno, a big, and Braden Hawthorne, a guy out on the wing, good positional size at 6'8". I love kind of the mixture of these guys, all kind of in the 20s or 30s in the class, and one international player, another big, Jelavic from Croatia. He's a 6'11" power forward, as Lance mentioned earlier, can step out and knock it down a little bit. And so Lance, it seems like a nice mix of fresh blood coming in along with the transfers and the guys already in place.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this freshman class because I think all of these guys can stay for multiple years. And something that I was preaching like a year or so ago, and I've been kind of banging the table, and I've probably said it several times on y'all's show as well. I really like what Dan Hurley did at UConn as far as recipe for success with his roster of the blend. It wasn't just high-profile recruits. It wasn't just transfer portal additions. It wasn't just a senior-laden roster. It was a really nice blend of experience, talent, and then pieces that he had developed over the years or transfer portal guys that he was bringing in last. It was a really, really nice blend. And I think that with this freshman class of Johnson, Marino, Hawthorne, and then technically Jelavic, all four of these guys can be in the program at least 2 seasons, I think, and then have the opportunity to get this team to where they want to be in the NCAA tournament because of how high their ceiling is as prospects. It's not just, oh, we're bringing in these 3 stars and of course they're going to be around forever. It's, oh, we've got these really high 4 or 5 stars that are not necessarily NBA ready. And so we have the opportunity to develop them and win with them across multiple seasons. I really like what Jasper brings as far as scoring ability. Not the most consistent player so far, according to reports, but when he's on, he's nearly impossible to stop shooting the ball. Malachi, I think, is a very high floor prospect. I continue to comp him to Janai Broom coming out of high school. I think that if he's able to stretch out to the 3-point line, which he's shown the ability to do at various points, could end up having a Broom-like impact. Not the most athletic player, but really a big-time gravity around the basket on both ends of the floor. Braden Hawthorne, he might have the highest upside as an NBA prospect of anybody on this roster, and that I'm including Jayden Quaintance in this because of what he can be offensively. If he can gain, which he's already gained 15 pounds, if he can gain 15 more pounds and have another year of development underneath Pope, matchup nightmare. At 6'8", can handle the ball. Was playing guard for most of his high school career, if I'm not mistaken, before he had a major growth spurt. This kid was looking at either going to West Virginia or Duke or some high-profile school, and Kentucky was able to snatch him up at the end of the recruiting cycle. You will know Braden Hawthorne's name in a year. He is going to be special, very special. Jelavic is somebody that I'm fascinated by. I don't necessarily know how impactful he's going to be this year at the 4, but you need an Andrew Carr type player, I think, on this roster. And Jelavic, I think, Mitch fits that role. I don't think perfectly, but well, but because he can stretch out to the 3-point line. He's going to be able to do some things around the basket. He's got a nice post-up game to him, even though nobody really talks about that. So the freshman class plus Jelavic is great. We've talked about JQ, Jayden as well. Diabate, I think, is going to be awesome defensively for Kentucky. Exactly what you need. You need a junkyard dog on this squad, man. You need a glue guy, and Diabate can be that perfectly. And look, I don't expect him to shoot 41 or 40+% from 3 like he did a year ago on low volume. But if he could shoot like 33, 34 plus, then you're getting everything that you need out of him, I think, at that spot. Denzel, I've written so much and talked so much about how perfect he is as a secondary playmaker. not the most efficient guy. He was taking a lot of shots off the dribble a year ago at Florida. And I know that Todd Golden in Florida, very good offense, all about analytics, but I think that he can be even better under Pope because of just how rigid this system can be at times, as far as you will get your shots in these places and you will not create off the dribble. And I think that Aberdeen can showcase the ability to be a good spot up shooter in different situations. So I'm excited about all of these guys. And then Cam Williams, we'll talk about him here a little bit more in depth, but I think Cam can be very special, shooting 41+% from three as a freshman at Tulane at 6'8". You've got height, you've got physicality, you've got muscle, you've got athleticism. Isaac, you've got everything here. This is exactly what you want.
And as with so many teams all around the nation, it's just about getting it to work together and how quickly you can make that happen for the Cats. Lance, quickly, a couple of the things before we get to the schedule here. I'm assuming that we're both assuming that Otega Oweh is in the starting lineup. I think we're both assuming that once JQ is healthy, he's in the starting lineup. Assuming he's not ready to go from day one, who are the other four, the quartet that will join Otega Oweh, first guys on the court? Now, look, I know it's always like, well, sure, but other guys might close it out and maybe the starters aren't. But this is what people care about. We talk about the starting five. Lance, who are yours?
I think that you and I are pretty much on the same page here as far as day one goes. I think that the starting five right now, and I don't know if this would be my starting five, but I'm not the coach. I'm not the guy that made it to the Sweet 16. I'm just a podcaster. But the starting five right now, I think, would be Jaland Lowe at point, Otega at the 2, Aberdeen at the 2, Oweh at the 3, Diabate at the 4, and then Brandon Garrison at the 5. I think that he will start the season more than likely if JQ is not healthy. And even as JQ gets healthy, I think that Garrison will probably still be the starter and Pope will bring Jayden Quaintance off the bench for a portion of this non-conference slate. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything in terms of minutes played, but in terms of starting, it's Lowe, Aberdeen, Oweh, Diabate, Garrison, and then you've got your bench rotation, which is about as deep as anybody in the country.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's the nice thing. No need to rush JQ back. Let him work his way, and when you feel completely confident, then he's back. Lance, last thing I want from you here, give me your breakout player for these Cats. And I know you could pick from any number of guys and define it in any number of different ways, but who would you go with for a breakout?
Yeah, I think that if you want to look at hyper efficient guys who can spray it from beyond the arc, obviously last season Kentucky had a lot of different guys that kind of fit that mold, but this year kind of limited in terms of really high efficiency. Let's go with the guy that shot the best from three a season ago. Let's go with Cam Williams out of Tulane. 9.3 points. He was shooting 62% inside the arc, 41.2% outside the arc. He was grabbing almost 5 rebounds a game, assists and a half per game, a block per game. As a freshman guard at Tulane, kid was doing all of these different incredible things, had some really big games late in the year for the Green Wave. I'm really excited about what Cam could be at the 3 spot for Kentucky. They need shooters there. They're going to get him on the floor. They're going to ask him to spray it. We've seen some practice highlights where it's not just been him in catch and shoot spots. It's him creating off of the dribble and nailing some threes, some tough shots in practice. I think that they can get him to be a little bit more versatile in what he brings to the table offensively. This is another kid with very high NBA upside, somebody that was getting some rave throughout the course of the offseason. So I'm going to go with Williams, although, like we've mentioned, I think that Aberdeen would be a great pick here. As you guys have already talked about on your show, I've talked about on my show, he's going to be great. I think that Colin Chandler could be a good player here as far as breakout goes. So many different pieces that we don't necessarily know about in this system, in this spot, that could possibly go and be incredible, or who knows, they could all average 9 points per game and we could just see the most balanced rotation ever. But I'm going to go with Cam. I think he has a great chance to be special.
It's going to be a super fun non-conference schedule for the Cats, including a matchup between Mark Pope and his former head coach down in Atlanta, plus the always tough SEC gauntlet. How's it all going to play out? Lance and I'll give you that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Monarch Money. Look, most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether that's 401ks, whether it's properties, investments, whatever. And when you don't have that full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. Nobody wants to do that. And that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool. Entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop, phone, tablet, whatever device. Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel like, man, I'm in control of my money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. something that matters to me is my wife and I, we spend a lot of time making sure that we're on the same page financially, that they're up to date and in good shape. And Monarch makes that really simple for us to be able to review our finances together, where we can both see budgets, goals, spending activity, all of it in one place. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year. Again, that's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Lance, let's talk schedule. We'll start with the non-con, where SEC teams play 13 games. Obviously, as is the new world now, we also get some really fun exhibition opportunities. Big Blue Madness is coming up on Saturday, October 11th. Then hosting Purdue Friday, October 24th. That is going to look, it's exhibition. I don't mind. Appointment viewing. And then Georgetown on Thursday, October 30th. The high major games in the non-conference schedule, with all due respect to the mid-major teams on the gauntlet there, we'll start with Veterans Day, Tuesday, November 11th. That game at Louisville, for some reason, it's so way early. Then we get the Champions Classic a week later on November 18th. This year is Michigan State, which means that we'll have Duke and Kansas in the other game. Then the ACC SEC Challenge at home in Rupp against North Carolina on Tuesday, December 2nd. A lot of fun Tuesday matchups. Their very next game, 3 days later, Friday against Gonzaga in Nashville at Bridgestone. So a little early preparation for the SEC tournament there. And then two other high major games in non-conference, Saturday, December 13th against the Hoosiers. And then Saturday, December 20th. We love December Saturdays down in Atlanta for the CBS Sports Classic against St. John's, who, if you're like, why is St. John's in the CBS Sports Classic? UCLA pulled out this year, and St. John's, thankfully, is the replacement. So we get Pitino, Pope. That's going to be awesome. Lance, this is a super fun non-con schedule. Just to remind everybody, St. John's, Indiana, Gonzaga, North Carolina, Michigan State, at Louisville, not to mention Purdue in exhibition play. We're going to know a lot about Mark Pope's team by the time we hit SEC play in January.
And I'm just praying that they can stay healthy this time. Can we please stay healthy through the non-con slate? I would absolutely love it. You can't see it as well here on YouTube if you're watching, but as you mentioned the Purdue game, I looked and I see that October 24th date. We're recording this September 23rd. Isaac, we're a month out. We are a month out from basketball being played. I am so excited. I cannot tell you how long it feels like it's been between the end of March Madness and finally getting some practice and some actual ball here in a month. I am super fired up because that Purdue game, I know Kentucky is not going to have JQ more than likely. It's going to be some different guys out maybe. But Purdue, that's a huge exhibition game for Kentucky to kind of get some feelers as to where they are offensively. And then Georgetown, I don't think is a slouch either. I think that's going to be another solid test less than a week later on Thursday. So two exhibition games that you should feel pretty fired up about. Look, even if Kentucky loses both those games, who cares? We don't have Jayden Quaintance and it doesn't count. Awesome. Let's keep rolling. Louisville is going to be a very, 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 very tough game here on November 11th. I don't like the fact that it's this early. I would have liked Kentucky to have had every single player available possible. We'll see if JQ is ready to go. I think that he will be healthy. It's a question of whether or not he'll actually play. Louisville, really, really good. One of the best backcourts in the nation. I don't know if I necessarily trust their front court, which is where I think Kentucky could expose them, but that's to break down in a matchup in November whenever we do a preview episode of that. Michigan State, I think, is going to be a fun game regardless of whoever the Spartans have out there, just because of how good of a coach Tom Izzo is. That's going to be tough in the Champions Classic. UNC, obviously you and I will be talking about that game in December whenever that rolls around. Gonzaga, I'll be at that game in Bridgestone. That should be a really fun one between Mark Few and Pope, a coach that Pope has not really had a whole lot of success against. Managed to pull one over him last year, pulled off a 16-point comeback miracle. Can they do it again? We'll find out. Indiana, I think, is going to be much improved. That should be a really good competitive game. And then St. John's, like you mentioned, man, Pope, Pitino, it's all the storylines you could possibly want in Atlanta. I hate the fact that this game is going to be played at 12:30 Eastern. Not a huge fan of that being so early, but you know what? I'm just thankful that we're getting the game, man. Getting to see these two different coaches go up against each other. St. John's with their incredible defense, Pope with his high-octane offense. I think it's kind of going to be a clash of styles, I think, in terms of what these two coaches are bringing, which is crazy considering the fact that Pope is a disciple of Rick Pitino. So I'm very interested to see how these two teams square up against each other, especially if both teams are healthy. So, man, this is a loaded non-conference slate. Like you mentioned, we're going to find out exactly who Kentucky is, I think, because of how many tough teams they're going to have to face. Some teams that are going to be really good defensively, some teams that are going to be incredible offensively. A lot of teams here that could absolutely win the national title. They could cut down the nets in March for sure. You wouldn't expect anything less from a Kentucky non-conference schedule, but man, I'm really excited to see what the Wildcats can do here.
And then, of course, the SEC schedule is also going to test Kentucky in a big way.
Yeah.
18 games here, home and homes with Florida, Tennessee, and Vandy. That's obvious. I mean, you don't get any cupcakes in that. I mean, there's not really many cupcakes in the SEC with, LSU, South Carolina. We see you guys too. But man, tough games, starting it all off at Alabama. So that's going to be pretty difficult. Lance, when it's all said and done, where do you project Kentucky to finish in the SEC standings? How do you see the regular season record ultimately playing out?
Yeah, so let's walk through this here real quick. I think Kentucky's going to win the SEC. That is my prediction heading into the year. I've been doing this show for going on 5 seasons now. I don't know if I've ever genuinely predicted Kentucky to win the conference. I'm doing it now. Let's go ahead and mark this one down and be for real. I think Kentucky is the best team in this league. I think that with Auburn taking a step back, possibly with Bruce Pearl retiring, I think that opens the gate for Kentucky to at the very least be a top 4 team in this conference. I think that Florida is going to be very good, but I think that Kentucky is going to find a way to find more wins on the schedule. I think that Alabama is going to be good, but again, I think Kentucky's just going to find more wins here. I think that Tennessee is going to be good. I think that Arkansas is going to be good, but I really do think that the Wildcats have their best shot in a hot minute to win this conference outright in the regular season. I'm going to put them at 14-4. Now, obviously, we could go through and say, well, which are the games that they're going to lose here? And I'm just going to say, I think that Kentucky's going to dominate their home slate. I think that they're going to do that. And then it's going to be really up to how consistently they can show themselves on the road. I think that games against A&M, Florida, Arkansas, Bama, Tennessee, I think LSU might be a sneaky game there before that Tennessee game on January 17th. Yeah. There's a lot of different places where Kentucky could trip up, but I think that 14-4 is kind of where I'm leaning for Kentucky in this conference slate. As far as the non-con goes, I actually don't know if I've actually done win-loss here. So let's walk through this really quickly. Nichols will be a win. Valpo will be a win. Louisville will be, I'll say it's a loss. Eastern Illinois will be a win. Michigan State will be a win. Loyola will be a win as well. Tennessee Tech and then UNC. Gonzaga will be a win. NC Central will be a win. IU will be a win. And then St. John's will be a loss. So I think you go 10-2. Excuse me. Am I missing one there? Am I missing one?
Bellarmine, right?
Yeah. So it's going to be 11-2. 11-2 there for the Wildcats alongside the 14-4. I think, again, Kentucky's going to win this thing outright. Will they win the SEC tournament? I'm not quite sure. But I think that's going to put Kentucky at 25-7, right? I think that's 25-6, excuse me. I think this is going to be the best regular season that Kentucky's had since, when was it? 2022 with the first year with Oscar Tshiebwe. I think they went 25-6, somewhere around there. So I think the Wildcats are going to have their best shot to be the most dominant they've been in the regular season in a hot minute. So that's my prediction for Kentucky this year.
Yes, and that would be 25-6 in the 2022 regular season, so they could match that exactly with that total, Lance. I actually had Kentucky finishing second behind Florida, having their entire front court intact, right, +1, right? And then obviously it's going to be a lot about how can Boogie Fland and Xavion Lee come together. Crazily, I can't wait for this game. Closing the regular season, Florida heading to Rupp. I'm praying to all the basketball gods that game is for the SEC regular season championship.
That, by the way, whenever the schedule came out, and I'm sorry to cut you off, whenever the schedule came out, that's what I said. I'm like, this is gonna decide the title. This is gonna be the game that does it. I really hope it is.
Man, I really hope it does. With the game at Florida being on Valentine's Day, Saturday, February 14th. By the way, Lance, I went slightly lower than you. I was 10-3 in non-con, 13-5 in conference play, for a total of 23-8. But I could see either of those as a reality. In fact, let me give you my floor and ceiling, and you tell me if I've, not gone far enough, if I'm too far, any of that. My floor.
Okay.
JQ can't ever really get healthy. Nobody is able to fully replace the shooting of Brea and Almanor and Butler and Robinson. So spacing becomes a bit of an issue. Maybe Cats fall to 7th-ish in the SEC, make the SEC quarterfinal, get a 5 or 6 seed in the NCAA tournament, and ultimately get bounced. I'd say in the second round. I mean, I guess if we're talking floor, first round, why not? But I feel like they at least win one. Ceiling, JQ is healthy sooner than expected, as we kind of been talking about. The pieces all fit. The shooting steps up. Everyone lives up to what you hope they can be. All three freshmen are able to carve out some sort of role, compete with Florida right there at the top of the SEC, make the Final Four as a 1 or 2 seed in Mark Pope's second year. That's what I've got as my floor and ceiling.
I think that's very realistic as far as the floor goes. I think you could honestly, you could probably take it a little bit lower if Jayden Quaintance isn't healthy and Kentucky can't shoot. You're absolutely, I think, dead on there. I think Kentucky could end up being a 5, 6, 7 seed in the NCAA tournament, and get all your 6, 7 jokes out of the way now, kids. But the ceiling, I think, you're also spot on. Kentucky is a title contender if they are able to get these things rolling here, especially offensively. Reports out of practice are saying that Kentucky is going to be much better defensively and that they are going to take a slight step back offensively, but the shooting has been coming along in practice. It's been better than I think people have expected. So that's exciting. So I think that is a very realistic floor and ceiling for Kentucky. Obviously, it's difficult to predict once you get down to that Elite Eight, that Final Four, kind of who's going to win the national championship, right, because of how much of a crapshoot the NCAA tournament can be. But yeah, Elite Eight, Final Four, national title, somewhere between there, I think is Kentucky's ceiling, depending on how their matchups fall, depending on how the health goes in the postseason. So yeah, I think that would be a very, very fair thing to say as far as floor and ceiling goes.
Lance, as far as NCAA tournament projections, I went with a 3 seed and a Sweet 16, but I'm baking into that the possibility that JQ, it's more like a December-y kind of date before he gets going. So Kentucky in that scenario maybe ends up dropping a couple games I otherwise wouldn't expect them to get. However, I would say 2 seed with Elite Eight, Final Four, national champion upside, assuming he's healthy sooner rather than later. So I feel like there's 2 completely different outcomes for this team, depending on how quickly and how fully healthy JQ is.
Yeah, I think that I would agree with you there as far as kind of what they could do in the postseason. I would say if I'm looking at my 25-6 and then 11-2 in the non-con, Kentucky I would imagine would be a 2 or a 1 in that scenario. Yeah. And then I agree with you. I think that this team can make the Sweet 16. They can get to the Elite Eight. They can get to the Final Four. They can get to the national championship. It all depends on matchups and how hot they're playing in March. I really do think that it's dependent on what the rest of the tournament looks like and Kentucky's health there. And we're just going to have to figure out what that looks like in March. It's very difficult, I think, to predict that accurately now. A lot of people end up being made a fool in preseason college basketball because a lot of teams fall apart very quickly. And then sometimes the teams that fall apart very quickly, oh, look, they're back in the fold in March somehow. So I think that Sweet 16, I think Kentucky can definitely get back there with this roster. It's just a matter of what exactly happens around them. And if Jayden Quaintance is healthy, that kind of dictates whether or not they can go deeper into this thing. I would like to see Kentucky go deeper into this thing, but I think that Sweet 16 is where Kentucky fans should be looking as if everything goes right, as like, okay, we can win 2 games in the tournament and then see what goes from there.
Yeah. Well said, Lance. Great stuff, folks. If you're not already following Locked On Kentucky, make sure you go check out all of Lance's great work over there. I'm so flustered because I love it and what Lance does. So make sure you go follow Locked On Kentucky. If you've not followed our show on YouTube and Twitter, make sure you do that as well so you don't miss a second. I said it earlier, we'd love to have you join us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord. That link's in the show notes. Absolutely free to join. A great place to be and hang out and talk college hoops all the time. As always, I want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild, Popes. Appropriately today, cheers to the McBruins, and until tomorrow's show. Peace.
All right, that was our conversation with Isaac Shade, host of the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Really appreciate him having me on his show. Make sure to go subscribe, by the way, to Locked On College Basketball. He and Andy Patton do such a great job over there. They're breaking down a lot of different big-time teams, previewing their seasons. If you want to go watch that over there on their channel. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. Follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Talk about Tyron Stokes. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.